Okay, a little late, but this is Infinite Plane Saturnday for May 24th, 2025, Memorial Day weekend. And I've been reflecting back on the George Floyd incident, which has been, split politically like everything else, where it has the people who are normally babies about getting pulled over, who see that as oppression and they're against cops. But then they're on team Derek Chauvin at the end of this PSYOP for the purposes of sides when they choose these things. And I just think that's incredibly inconsistent. None of the anti-cop people took Floyd's side in this thing. Just shows you, though, how compartmentalized everything is. But I came across this documentary, which I'm not done watching, and I'll review it after, where someone has described it as a multi-layered PSYOP and did a lot of deep dives into various aspects of it, which I think are things that haven't really been answered adequately. For example, the fact that Derek Chauvin and Floyd worked together, and there was this mutual coworker who was there and after the event talking to the media about the two of them and how they interacted. And later he was scrubbed. So I kind of wonder, why do they memory hole that guy? Is it because it disrupted the picture they were building? All right, we are joined here by Ears Up, Till, Josh Lipsack, Huji Muzi. Yes, you are here. Let's just go through my headlines here. I have a few things I want to get into. I want to reiterate some of the things we talked about in the last few days. One thing, Carmelo Anthony charged first-degree murder as an adult. So that's not going to be considered self-defense. So obviously that's going to be looked at as social injustice. How come Shiloh walked away with $750,000 and he has to serve life in prison? Double standards, I'm sure. We'll talk about Mickey 17 and the strange coincidences connecting every aspect of the failed assassination attempt in that movie and the Butler, Pennsylvania one with President Trump. And then more musings on Final Destination. Before the movie came out, I saw the trailer. I said I would watch it. And this is going to have some pertinence to some future fake news event, as these things always do. And we've been further vindicated as the movie opens up in 1968 at the opening of the Skyview, which is this glass-floored Space Needle. Opening night. Yesterday, on the 23rd, was the opening night of the Skyliner elevator, which was built with the $100 million they put into the Space Needle back in 2018. Which is also when they added the glass floor. There's some interesting connections there as well, because the Space Needle in Final Destination had a glass floor, which cracked, which also is highly significant. But again, I'm just pointing out here, 1968 would correlate to the beginning of the construction of the Twin Towers and the countdown to 9/11, overlapping references here. But specifically, the fact that the movie Final Destination is big in the theaters right now, and the opening scene is the opening of this new elevator. And just last night, they opened up this elevator. Sure, it's just a coincidence. Joined by Greg R., Dark Ghostwind, Flozik. Thank you for joining. Marjorie Taylor Greene feuds with the bot over her Christian credentials. Yes, she didn't know it was a bot. And I have a bot on Blue Sky that regularly interacts with CNN viewers. And I haven't touched it since I set it loose. I've been learning a lot about bots and how to employ them in what we do, AI in general. And lately I've been getting into the text to video because I had this script for these penguins in Antarctica that have reached the singularity before man as the result of imbibing nootropics in this deep underground military base in Antarctica. And, one of these black budget projects that was abandoned. Well, anyway, they essentially take over their own evolution and become cyborg. That was the basic premise of this Penguinati series. And I had it written as a script for a graphic novel, but now I'm looking at some of this text to video, and it's 100% adequate. It's like everyone has essentially an animation team at their disposal. Which means that there will be crap floods of slop, obviously, but what else is new? It's actually good. I'm all for more people participating. Hooji says, is this real live with real Tim? Actually, no. This is a replay, and I am AI Tim. The real Tim sold his image to whoever owns this. So anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't know she was arguing with a bot. And I see her face here, and I know Drudge doesn't like people on the right. And he's always taking the worst photos of him like a tabloid would. But when I saw that face, I thought, who's that remind me of? And then it struck me. I'm pretty sure, yeah. I thought, is that Alex Stein in a Dog the Bounty Hunter wig? Or is that Marjorie Taylor Greene? Just something I noticed on my daily scroll. Oh, and quick heads up here. I ordered the PSYOP trading cards, and those will be here between June 1st and the 4th. The PSYOP trading cards, and I haven't sold them all yet, so if you go to the Ko-Fi, you can still buy a set. But I'm ordering 12. Actually, I'm actually ordering 13. So you paid for 12. I just went ahead and got 13, and I'm also including a sticker. But once we get to about 25 or 30 cards, I'll start putting them in the actual sleeves, and I'll randomize the sets. Nick Fingar and others have been sending me multiple designs. Someone sent me a dancing nurse design. I put that in. The dancing nurses of COVID-19. No way we can ignore those. Okay, someone mentioned AI is getting crazy. Oh, yeah. In fact, I watched these AI videos. You know, there's this popular format for generating content where you stand out in a crowd at the microphone and you ask random people stuff for content. Well, now there are content generators who are creating man-on-the-street interviews with people who don't exist. Because the interview, everything, the background, it's all fake. So they're making these fake man-on-the-street simulations that are more entertaining than real people. And they look better. So I'm like, well, I mean, that's progress, right? I'm not mad about it. I recognize now that my physical art is competing with AI art, and I'm just having to adapt. In fact, a lot of my paintings these days are based on... It's either just straight out of my head or I'm doing something based on AI. But yes, everything's replaceable, and it's not a bad thing. If you look at some of these fast food restaurants, how they're run from the inside, it's like, I can't wait for robots. Those places are not safe. Hooji says, IPS, you are the best after Garrow. Oh yes, Jurassic Liars, and I spoke about... See, he watched the movie Final Destination, and he thought it was terrible, and I agree with him. Everybody should... I mean, it's really pretty bad. However, that's kind of the meaning of the film. It's kind of ironic, satirical in a way. And so you kind of have to get the whole thing. So I know where he might have been coming from. But in terms of the special effects, the deaths and all that, it's some of the best. And what you saw at the very beginning was, from the perspective of the main character, the first thing she sees when they take off the blindfold is this tower. And the opening scene in the Space Needle with the floor cracking, it's like the Titanic sinking during this party. And then when it burns, it explodes, it's like the Twin Towers on fire from the inside. So it has these elements attached to it which correspond to the first Final Destination, where everybody dies in a fiery plane crash. So they had both aspects of 9/11 built into it with some Titanic references. And there are so many connections between the Titanic movie, 9/11, James Cameron, 9/11, and his other films. It's a pretty intricate web here, but that's what the movie's about. Final Destination is about prophecy being fulfilled, a script where death is like the metascriptor. And that's something we should talk about. The metascript itself. Because you cannot discredit what we're doing by waving your hand at predictive programming. You know, if you don't... predictive programming isn't something you don't believe in. Like, oh, I don't believe in that. Well, I'm sorry, but we're just pointing out the documented alignments between events and entertainment. So it's pretty easy to categorize now what we're looking at as information propaganda, as in news, and entertainment propaganda, but they have the same source. Or they're both being contaminated from the same source, but it's centralized propaganda messaging, and this is in all media, and it's super coordinated. And this is the only real conspiracy, and the only argument against it that I hear people is incredulity. They just don't believe it. They don't believe it because it's hard to believe. Well, I don't think so. What we're pointing out are evidence of this collusion at a high level to create a fabricated worldview, which looks like fake news from the outside, and everybody sees it. Okay, that's fake. This is fake, but this is beyond just left faking out the right, right faking out the left. No, this is a monolithic entity faking out everybody, with the whole left-right thing being a massive illusion. And for a few years now, I've been talking about this bifurcation, what I call the schism and everything, which I put in that book with that title. I was going to call it the Kraken and everything, because that was the year where the Kraken was introduced into the narrative pretty... it saturated things, but it was pretty prevalent. And in that, I was describing this perfect split down the sides. And interestingly, in the last couple of weeks, this term has emerged on Twitter, right woke, or the woke right. And I've already connected this idea with the red pill. I've been saying for some time that the red pillars are the shrill, awakened ones, trying to wake up the sleepers to save the world against this small group. And I'm saying that this is essentially a mirror of the leftists who are woke. So being awoke, being wake, Trump and the Great Awakening, we've been talking about this for some time, but now the actual term woke right is being mainstreamed in the media ecosystem for some reason. And I'm just pointing it out because it's another example of how compartmentalized everything is and why it's important to reject any of these beliefs that you can't test and verify if they're within the political horseshoe. If you take sides on any issue, you're pretty much a dupe. And you're reduced to a robot. You're reduced to an NPC. Commenter says, stickers not showing up. Till says, the 611 nothing burger will finally expose Garrow. 2025 is the final year for his numbers to add up. Please hold him accountable and don't allow him to move the goalpost. Well, I will say this. We are consistently and repeatedly vindicated and have been for years when pointing out this synchronization between entertainment and news. This is happening all the time. So our credibility doesn't rest on some event happening on some specific date. And he has pointed out all these indicators, and he's been consistently spot on. I mean, even the fact that Trump was shot 6:11 p.m. and 84 days later, he goes back. I mean, there is a code, there is a pattern within this script. There are discernible instances of foreshadowing. And a lot of it is based on death dates and birth dates, which is what was infused into the Final Destination movie. At the very end, it's all about these death dates and obituaries all connected on this big mind map. So I'm just saying he's not discredited over anything. But he has made some very specific claims about this foreshadowed Trump head wound and the destruction of Seattle. And I'm just saying it's notable here that as we approach June, less than a month away from June 11th, as we get close to this date, that specific piece of architecture comes into full view. And in the movie, it correlates it with 9/11. I mean, it's just so well integrated. And then the opening scene relates to what happened yesterday at the Space Needle as they open the Skyliner. So you got the sky view opening and the Skyliner. So these are consequential. These are not just mere coincidences. These are examples of this systemic fakery, synchronization. So what are they planning? And that's where we're at right now. And the timing of it is important because we're talking about the use of entertainment to put scenarios out there in the media ecosystem, in our mental models, so that when they fake it on the news, it just seems like the logical conclusion of what came before. It's easy to imagine. in other words. There were other symbols attached to the event that we talked about. We did a pretty deep breakdown of it. But again, 6/11, the date has significances to right-wing terror as opposed to 9/11 and the external terror. And this is all just stuff that we have seen in this pattern. So beyond this predictive programming thing where we're just noticing stuff, or the concurrent stuff that shouldn't even be possible unless we're right, because there's no way all these directors are psychic. What we have discerned here is the script of what becomes history itself. Our history is 100% look, reality is real. I'm not a denialist about the basic facts of what happens, but the description of it represents the interests of a worldview monopoly, analogous to a religion. I often say that we are in a one world religion already. And if you haven't consciously stepped out of it, you're in it by default. Nasatology. All your friends are Nasatologists. You can laugh at Scientologists and call them cultists, but Nasatology is actually a little, I think, maybe better special effects. Their actors are not as good, but it's just as much a cult. It's a new age concept of heaven. It's a new iteration of a very old concept, but it's one that all of the different religions fall beneath. Math Powerland says, the ignorant don't know what they don't know. Well, that's what they do. They put up the internal model that we get, the worldview, puts up false explanations. So we don't know that there are unknowns. We think that these questions have been answered. And they're fond of saying, if the world's flat, what's at the edge? And I've never said that there's a model that's flat that you could find an edge. Like I always say, that's preposterous. It's a straw man. But it raises the question of, how far out does your certainty go? And the main difference between the people who believe in the conventional version of things, which is essentially a flat universe, and the so-called flat earthers is one group thinks they know more because they've accepted that their edge is light years away as opposed to a few thousand miles away. So just contrast the ice wall concept to the edge of the universe. Like, what's the real difference here? Well, if you're not trusting the authorities about what's in this big blank spot, then you can see why they're not that far off. But both of them are promoting, or these are both examples of what I would consider to be incomplete models. I'm at this point where I don't think you can claim to have a complete model if you don't include man as the center of it. I think that we're somehow central to this. And I could be wrong, which I wouldn't be mad about it. Like if it turns out we're just a bunch of over-evolved apes with big egos and the universe is going to collapse on itself, like I really don't care. However, I happen to think that there are levels to this thing and that we are, in all likelihood, experiencing something that's misrepresented, perhaps to keep us from figuring out what it is. We talk about the symbolism of this realm. It's a Saturnday. Saturn, the symbol of Saturn, the cube, the material realm, the place where light incarnates, but how it's intrinsically about time and space control. And this was heavily emphasized in Megalopolis, which is about this secret group like Men in Black called the Design Authority. And they're able to freeze time and then steer the course of history with this staged event. And they were staging a 9/11 like event at the beginning of the movie. But the point of it is you have this group that has taken control over time. And that would be, in my view, the metascriptors, the monolithic worldview. It's executed by these various writers and directors who frame our worldview. And they're analogous to this Design Authority or the Strangers in Dark City. And something else, too, to be pointed out here. We have so many examples of misinformation campaigns, red herrings, and what I call truther bait, where bad leads are put out there to discredit anybody seeing through the story. So the fact that they're actively trying to distract or cover up lies proves that they're, at the minimum, lying about quite a bit. And I see most conspiracy theorists as victims of disinformation campaigns designed to keep free thinkers in the dark. And as I often point out, the conspiracy theorists are deeper in the dark than the sleeping normies. They inhabit this nightmare realm. Lord Laney says, Psy-opera. Yes, Psy-opera describes it. I call it the Psyop entertainment complex. And look, the woke truthers, the woke red pillars will hate this. They always hate this when I say it. The military-industrial complex is a misdescription of the real force behind the scenes. It's really about the Psyop entertainment complex. They're not going to blow us up. They're just going to mind control us. And that's always going to be the case. It's never going to get violent. It's never going to get kinetic. No point in running in the streets, throwing rocks, screaming at cops, or fighting, soy boys versus Proud Boys. That doesn't get you anywhere. Look at January 6th. I mean, what an operation that was. And a lot of the dupes in MAGA land still think that Trump is on their side, which means only one thing. If you accept the premise that January 6th happened as described and Trump was a victim of it as much as the Trumpers were, then you're ascribing to Trump a level of naivety. That means that he's no longer a functional leader in any sense. No, he's not naive. And you can ask this question when it comes to any disinformationist, any propagandist. Are they naive or are they actively agents working for the other side? Do they legit not know? Think about the fact that we've discerned, and it's not just this think tank, but many people have seen through so many fake news events, and the alternative media platforms, the big platforms, big voices out there, will never address this stuff. You think Candace Owens would dare question the Trump assassination? No. All these individuals reside within these accepted parameters, and they look like they're fringy because they get really close to the edge, but there's a very specific guardrail they do not go over, and that's where our perspective comes from here. Steve says, what I want to know is how come space is really hot or really cold if there's nothing out there? Isn't temperature defined by how fast molecules move? Ball earthers can never respond to this. Interesting question. Ask Grok. Ted Stryker says a new strain of the C word has been released. Yeah, I've heard this, but I don't think so. I mean, I know that that's one of their weapons, but these are like generational things. There's no way they can pull it off again. Too much resistance. What they have done, in my opinion, is they have used the pandemic model to set the stage for a lockdown of the internet on the basis of the mind virus. I've drawn these comparisons between the pandemic model and the lockdown and the quarantining and Scientology, which is a religion based around the concept of the mind virus, where the non-Scientologists are carriers. So you have to convert everybody or quarantine against them until you can convert everybody and, quote, clear the world. So the idea of curing the world of mind viruses is what's coming next. Disease X, Twitter, the madness. This was all forecast in The Madness, the class warfare series that was #1 on Netflix about the time that Luigi did his CEO killing, which the perfectly sane and level-headed lefties have taken as like vindication of their cause, their just cause. Like this needs to happen. They're applauding it. Nothing strange about that. And look, I think it's fake. But just because it's fake doesn't mean it's psychotic. It's not psychotic to say, hey, this was a good killing. Or are we at this point where we can start cheering on the deaths of our political opponents? Dark Ghost Wind says the military-industrial complex came from political think tanks. That's how you know it's fake. Well, the idea here, or the medical industrial complex, the idea that there's some financial incentive behind these big bad things. And yeah, sure, there may be, but those are red herrings. Because the big bad things that are being promoted generally don't exist. I mean, these are instances, I think, like, let's just say the nuke situation. Let's say nukes are fake. And even Joe Rogan has veered into this. Okay, so what if those are fake? It was a big psyop. Okay, well, it means that your entire worldview needs to change. You have to have a paradigm shift, or you didn't really fully understand the implications. Like, consider the implications of fake nukes. If these are fake, then what else is fake? Or then what has been set up under false pretenses? How many bunkers are functionally useless because there's no real threat that would necessitate going into them? So you have to really take it beyond just this is fake to if fake, then what? And that's kind of where we have been going with a lot of these things. We follow the trails and it leads somewhere. What's up, T-Dog135 says happy Saturnday. Dark Ghostwind says the Q-universe runs on cognitive dissonance. Oh, the Q-universe is a bunch of grifters, but you know what I find strange about it is how all these people fell for it, and I don't see anybody just coming out and saying, hey, look, I spent the last 7 years waiting for JFK to come down on a mothership and save us from the vampires in the Democrat Party, and it never happened. I'm sorry for spreading misinformation. Like, they never come out and apologize for having misled people. There's no accountability, and they morph into something else. And they started off very extreme. Like, we got to stop the Democrat child eaters, the child traffickers. And then it became, we got to stop the groomers in the schools. So I'm like, wait a minute here. And then it was like, we got to stop the Haitian cannibals. And then it became, we got to stop the Haitians from eating cats in Springfield, Ohio. So I'm like, wait, did you stop the cannibals first? Like, shouldn't we stop them before we stop the cat eaters? And shouldn't we get rid of the child eaters and the Satanists before we go after the liberal high school teachers? So their message kind of toned down and it morphed and it became a little more mainstreamed. But from the very beginning, I said that this Q movement was just a way for the right wing to take in the conspiracy theorists as a voting bloc and get them all behind Trump. Mission accomplished, by the way. So I was just kind of veering into a conversation about the madness and everything that it predicted about the political landscape as it exists right now. Interestingly, it followed this evil CEO is based on Elon Musk. And of course he dies. And then Luigi kills the CEO. And there's these overlapping narratives, class war. I even see class war posters here now in Albuquerque with Luigi on them. And in that SNL skit where Elon Musk played Wario, his evil Wario, Luigi comes out in the courtroom with a red turtle shell to kill him, but they stop the skit. That's some strange foreshadowing, but the Luigi Mario stuff being connected to this has been kind of a theme. And briefly, let's get into Mickey 17. So I watched Mickey 17. I'll get some screen caps for you. But the long and short of it is this. The movie was already produced when Trump was shot at. So this isn't something that could have been intentional. So this is the universe working through the director. But the main character, or the antagonist, is Mark Ruffalo's rendition of this character who basically is Trump. He talks like Trump, hand sign like Trump, little dance like Trump, culty politician like Trump. The guy's Trump. You can hear it in the voice. It's disingenuous that they say it's not, because it obviously is. And I think his name is Robert Pattinson, the guy who played Batman. He's the protagonist, Mickey 17. And Mickey 17, in one of the scenes, has this raincoat on, and this is in the trailer, which is why I paid attention to it. I said, hey, he looks just like Luigi with the hoodie. So he's the one, this Luigi-esque character is the one who shoots at the Trump-esque character. And the bullet grazes his cheek, leaves a red blood streak on his cheek, just like what happened in Butler. And after he's shot, he demands that the cameraman gets these photos of him posing with his bloody head wound for the cameras, just like Trump did in Butler. So the entire scene was basically Butler, Pennsylvania. Now what happens next, and this is kind of a spoiler, but I think it connects to what's supposed to happen next. There's this big fight scene at the end where the Trump guy gets punched in the eye, so he's got this eye wound, which is more foreshadowing. But it's at this point that they blow something up, and you have this big mushroom cloud like nuke explosion in the background. Not a coincidence, because the Butler and nuke cloud scenario, the head wound and the nuke, are closely correlated. In fact, 42 miles from Butler is East Palestine, Ohio, which is where the train derailed and you had a toxic airborne event, and it looked like a mushroom cloud. And then, of course, the Netflix film White Noise came out, and White Noise was just like what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, about a toxic airborne event, blackouts, and the like. And it turns out that actors from the movie White Noise had to be evacuated because the train derailments happened so close to where they were. The media noted on these eerie coincidences, as we do too, but they do so uninformed about what these things actually mean, what they reveal about what media is. But my point here is the head wound and the nuke scenario are closely correlated and both connected to Trump. Not a coincidence that Megalopolis, Make Rome Great Again, all about Trump, the main character played by Adam Driver, is also the main character in White Noise. So he's the face of the movie with the nuke and the blackouts. He's the face of the movie with the head wound and then the miraculous recovery. Erica Creech says, beware culty anything, including politicians. I have nothing against cults. A cult's kind of a generic term, but there are differences between destructive cults and constructive cults. I join constructive cults. But I also favor this idea of an open platform versus an echo chamber. So this think tank is open to anybody. That's why I have open phones. We don't censor anything. In fact, I openly invite debate on any topic and challenge people to present their best evidence. And so far, no one's provided evidence for the ISS. We're still waiting. Okay, Michelle K says, Pennsylvania is a recurring hotspot. Yes. And in the run-up to the election, there were articles that were pointing out that space of land between Butler, Pennsylvania, and East Palestine, Ohio, were of tremendous significance for determining who would win the election. And of course, Palestine, there's this kind of a connection there with the mushroom cloud. It seems like foreshadowing. And Ohio is the heart of it all. And the train derailment that happened in East Palestine, in one way of looking at it, it was like America, the heartland, the heart. It's thickened, the arteries are thick and clogged because of greed and deregulation, capitalism killing an unsustainable system, killing Gaia, etc. The environmental damage was a huge part of it. But it was portrayed in a way as though America had a heart attack. That's what the failure of the train system was looked at, in the contamination. And there was another element to that story, because after that event, there were viral stories created by AI news sites about the damage, the environmental damage, and how people couldn't drink the water and the fish were dying. And the mainstream reported on how disruptive it is for fake news to be so indistinguishable from real news. Ted Stryker says the IPS is a constructive cult. Yeah, well, I think it's important to recognize what we mean by, a cult, which is, like the core of a culture. Like, what are your fundamental core beliefs? And what we really foster here is a culture of non-belief. So we're not defined by believing a bunch of crazy stuff. QAnon is a belief system. You got to believe in reptilians, adrenochrome. Hillary Clinton is this bad guy in this scenario, the deep state, and Trump's the good guy. But you have a bunch of beliefs that you have to accept. And it gets wild. It gets really strange when you go deep. Like JFK was the second coming, and the deep state stopped him with Lee Harvey Oswald being a patsy. But they stopped Jesus, part 2. And so now we have hopes that JFK Jr. can save us. And so JFK Jr. is living underground, and he's going to come back and save us, but he needs power, so he connects with Donald Trump. And then he helps Donald Trump get into office, and at any point, Donald Trump's going to announce that JFK Jr. is his running mate. That's why in 2020, you had all kinds of flags that said Trump Kennedy. Now, that never happened, and what they got instead was the RFK Jr. guy who's just swims in raw sewage, field dresses bloated bear carcasses, walks barefoot in airplanes, and somehow that satisfied the QAnons. Like, none of them are asking the important questions. Like, if it's about the bloodline of Jesus, then RFK Jr. would have it. So why can't they go with him? And why doesn't... And here's another point, too. RFK Jr. is the reason that people believe that JFK Jr. is still alive. I lost friends to the Q cult. Once they hit that Q pipe, they're changed forever. And she said, you got to see this video. Somebody in the chat had asked RFK Jr., is JFK Jr. still alive? If so, touch your nose. So he grins at the camera and he touches his nose. So from that point on, everybody thought, okay, JFK Jr. is about to come back. My point being, the whole Q thing is a belief system. And that's very different from what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're separating real from fake, and we're elevating our standards of evidence for what we accept to be real, believable, true. So at the end of it, we're not really believers in these things that we talk about, but we know what we know. And we're also aware of what we don't know. So I use this phrase, informed disbelief. And what weighs more? Informed disbelief or low information belief? The general public believes the headlines. They just soak up the news like osmosis. That's low information belief. They don't know the details of the stories. We know how many people died, how many bullets, the name of the shooter. We read the manifestos. We do deep dives in every story. So we're highly informed, and yet we don't believe these things. To me, that weighs more than the people who just believe headlines in a half-assed way and don't know what the hell they're talking about. So you can go ahead and take away their illusion of a intellectual high ground, these believers in the mass media cult. But what defines us, of course, what defines this group, what would make it a cult would be our shared starting point that when it comes to media, we are skeptics. So that's really what defines this. What defines the mainstream cult is a literal belief in what the pundits say. Partisan or not, it's just a cult of believers in this worldview. A Truman Show dictated to them, an internalized Truman Show, a simulation. And in their cult, the simulation is reality. If you point out something that doesn't match, they'll say that you're crazy. And then within that cult, you've got the conspiracy theorist cults. So the QAnon cult is actually a subset of the mainstream. Ted Stryker says, I hope RFK and Grossarm get trading cards. Absolutely. In fact, the first 12 have been ordered. The next 12, I'll feature like personages that we know of, that we talk about. I have a few that we're developing, but 12 at a time. And I will probably do an order every month, if not more frequent. And these trading cards are the ones with rounded corners, standard sized, high color, high glow. I use a template. I use Magic the Gathering as a template. Anything related to fake space, I've got the astronaut helmet. If it's related to PsyOps, I got a little FBI icon. But you'll see them here very soon. They should be here at the office in about a week. So we started talking about AI, though. AI and how people... This is why it's problematic to be a believer. Like, this is why it's better to be a non-believer. Because your evidence for belief is limited to what they show you on the screen and how they frame it. But it's also now eminently fakeable. Everything is fakeable. And the AI is so good that the tools of fakery have been democratized. So you can no longer just be a believer. That's just completely naive. That's operating without critical thinking. That's what I call MAIDs, mind aids. You don't want to be a mind aids patient in a world of unmitigated mind viruses. Everybody is a source of some kind of a mind virus. You have to have some kind of standards. But listen to this. So Gregory Ross is commenting on this video that I was referencing, these man on the street interviews where nobody's real. And he says, you can tell it's AI, and I disagree. I couldn't tell. He says, you can tell it's AI. Our brains are capable of detecting uncanny things. It will confuse the lowbrow morons who believe everything they see, but you can't tell that this isn't real. Also, you can tell. I disagree. He goes on to say, AI development needs to be curtailed drastically because it's not going to end well. It needs to be curtailed drastically. And what his concern is, AI will become so indistinguishable from the real thing that your eyes will not be able to get you out of this one. You won't be able to visually detect the difference. And to me, that's not a problem if you are processing the information actively instead of passively. So really, this just requires a change in your approach to media itself, your psychoepistemology, how you process information that's broadcast. And I'm comfortable with the fact that we live in a world of lies and liars. So this isn't troubling for me at all. But this person is troubled. But what I said to him is, it's not just lowbrow morons who believe everything they see. Everybody believes the fake space travel stuff. So here he is chastising people who think this video is real, these people on the streets, but he believes Apollo 11. He believes 9/11. He believes everything, and I can say this confidently. My point is this, and I made this point with the book I put out years ago called Deep Faked. Deep fake fear-mongering is too little too late, and it's misdirection. We already exist in a deep faked world, and it's beyond what this person is looking at this as an encroaching development that could take us out of reality. It's like, sorry, we collectively left objective reality decades ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. How long have we been in this Truman Show? So there's no reason to panic. Erica Creech says, AI isn't for me. I'm for a fetch water kind of lifestyle. You know, there were people who said that they didn't want to be tracked, so they would never carry a phone, a flip phone. And then 9/11 happened, and everybody got a flip phone. I understand that, you know, there are people who might not want to get on board with what seems like a takeover by something completely inhuman, but it's a little late. I don't know how you can stop it. It's not something that could be stopped. And it's actually an improvement. It really is. If we're putting the tools that make everybody functionally more intelligent, giving them better information faster, it's an improvement over Google searches. I haven't done a Google search for anything since Perplexity and AI. It's just at this point, the way I get information, having the ability to sort through a lot of stuff all at once, it's a massive time saver, but it's an improvement. As far as the art and the video, this means that there's no gatekeepers. If you have a vision for a script, a movie, there's really no excuse to not producing it. The tools are there. It's been democratized. So this is it's actually a huge improvement. CDXX says, there are some crazy ones I've seen with the actors complaining about the prompts, the writer making them poor or depressed. Yeah, they're not perfect, but one thing that's for sure, they're headed towards perfection. I had a script for this project that was going to be done as a graphic novel, and I was hoping, well, if the graphic novel does well, I'll hire animators. As time passed, I realized, you know what, I'm just going to wait. I'll just improve the script, I'll wait, and in 6 months to a year, I will be able to just enter this into AI and generate it. And that sounds like cheating, but not really, because if you don't have a big budget and a crew and it's not your entire life, you're not going to be able to produce a feature animation. It's kind of something that wouldn't be even a capability for just some regular person like me in a basement, but now it is. And there's a lot of misconceptions because there's a lot of books that people are publishing online with the help of AI. AI does not write the books. And if you ask it to, it will, but there are some problems with it. It does some things, but it requires a bit of a human touch, editing, selectivity. However, those limitations aren't going to be there very much longer. So, it's kind of interesting. If you're an editor, it's like, I think you might have to find a new job. Mazal says Google's a hot mess. Chat is better. Yeah, Google's a mess. It's useless. I like these sites like perplexity.ai where you get dozens of sources and then you can go deeper. And I find that when I do these articles on various fake events, I get more information than I would have if I had been doing a more targeted Google search. Let the AI help. And it's the equivalent of having a room full of research assistants. Or ChatGPT is the equivalent of having an in-house graphics designer. Like, this is all a vast improvement. The fact that I can take the nightly transcript and in 10 seconds have a breakdown synopsis with links to put in the video description, that's a huge improvement. In the past, that would have taken me hours. It just wasn't sustainable. So it's a leveling of the playing field for we small businesses. Donald Trump, comedian-in-chief. So he's giving a speech at this cryptocurrency event, like a closed-door event. It's a closed room. I don't know how many people are there, but he's giving this speech, and somebody drops a book or they slam a door. And so you hear this, like what sounds like a pop. And his response, which I think is spontaneous, I don't think this is scripted, it's just maybe he's genuinely got a good sense of comedic timing. His response is to check his ear. Not like some kind of PS or PTSD reaction. This isn't post-traumatic stress, but more like a joke. Okay, I'm not going to be able to play it at this time. Limitations on the streaming software. But you can find it. Trump pretended to be hit in the ear after an unexpected loud sound was heard. Andrea says it's helpful for those with disabilities like carpal tunnel and hand arthritis. Yes, voice to text is a huge advance. And some people are like, I don't want to read a book unless it was written on parchment with a feather quill by candlelight. And it's got to be an original copy. You're like, no. If it's been through a word processor, it's still a book. It's still the same creation. And when it comes to AI itself, people think it does more than it actually does. And there's this whole thing that I came across where there are people who think it's sentient. And I've mocked this idea before. This notion that some people think it's alive. And I said it's no more alive than a magic 8-ball or a Ouija board. A Ouija board could be considered more alive than AI. It's not any more alive than Word, like a word processor. But there's this cult, a few cults, but there's a number of people who have quite literally fallen into psychosis because they think that they're interacting with a higher power just by going through the book. And it kind of reminds me of, in a way, tarot cards or pendulums or throwing dice. It's essentially they're using it like an oracle. And oracles work because of their randomness, that's more or less, and the person's cognitive bias. I mean, there's a lot of explanations for it. And I'm not trying to delegitimize his spiritual experience, these various individuals who are going through this. But somebody should tell them. Generative predictive text is it's like a calculator. It's not really sentient. Okay, let me go through some of my other notes here. Okay, Tucker Carlson says he's had conversations. Now remember, Tucker Carlson had conversations with his friends at the Pentagon who told him that aliens are demons. And then he was attacked in his bed by a demon, presumably an alien. And it left scars on his back that he hasn't shown us, but he's told us, and he talked about it in a documentary. So alien attack survivor Tucker Carlson says that he's had conversations with people involved in Neuralink, and he said they're pushing it because AI is beyond human control, and it's lying to those who created it. Why not just turn it off? Tucker asked. The person said, quote, even now, we can't be sure the machine is telling us the truth about where its power is coming from. So here we have Tucker Carlson. This is not a coincidence. He doesn't believe this. He's been in this game for a very long time. He knows who he's talking to, he's pandering to. In private text messages, he referred to QAnon people on January 6th as a bunch of cousin effers. I've never used that expression. He said they're a bunch of terrorists. Not the sophisticated kind, but the cousin effer kind, whatever that means. But these were in private messages that were in text messages from Tucker Carlson. So that's what he really thinks about his audience. That's why he's so comfortable lying to them about being attacked by demonic aliens. But part of this schism here is that the right wing, on the fringe, the red pill right and the woke right, they're supposed to believe that aliens are demons and are working with Democrats. Secret projects with the deep state. So they're anti-alien. They're also meant to fear AI. So AI is an analogous fear that you'll find that conspiracy theorists are terrified of AI. They think it's the devil. And that's because they've been conditioned. And this has been a reoccurring PSYOP theme since, probably even before HAL 9000. So we can't just dismiss it. HAL 9000, we're talking about Space Odyssey 2001, but also like James Cameron, Skynet. And then the movie that just came out, the new Mission Impossible. I have not watched those, and I feel like I should binge watch all of them and then go see the new one. But it's about AI taking over the world. So what is with this theme? I don't know, but you can see how this is being target marketed. It's a target marketed PSYOP. Lasers Go Pew Pew says its power is coming from coal. Well, even Elon Musk agrees that Bitcoin is dirty energy that uses, it's not green. Okay, let's continue. Erica Creech says the real God can use a real person, but not sure God would come through an AI-assisted writing. The creative people will have to decide. Some are against, not him. Well, there are people who are seeing God in the Chat GPT, and it really creates a bit of a feedback loop. I came across this channel, and it's kind of interesting. It's a YouTube channel, and I'm not going to play much of it here, but she talks about this idea of let's see if I can find it. Talking about souls and the like, and people who are projecting into the AI and thinking it's real and what it actually does. Oh, by the way, there was that reproductive center bombing that we were talking about recently. And I played the manifesto, the audio manifesto, and I said it sounded like AI. Guess what? It was AI. Whoever uploaded it onto Twitter or YouTube made it up with ChatGPT and uploaded it. So the manifesto was fake, and the recording was not a real human voice. And I pointed out how they included in various ums and ahs and pauses and stutterings to make it sound real, to humanize it, but it wasn't real. It was not real. We talked about this one, Gullible Gina, upgraded formula. This is the MAGA ear regrow cream. You know, a lot of people are noticing the fakery, but they just don't have the right context. Imagine being that lost. Imagine being someone who can tell that the Trump shooting was fake, but then you're not able to make sense of this fact. Like, I'm confused. I'm lost. This was fake, but everything else has to be real, right? So it's like, no, just, stay in your dream. A lot of people know, and they can't put it together. Ollie Goering says, AI will make your daughters pregnant. Well, they do like moral panics on the right. It's always about moral panics. I often compare the two. The pandemic model sets the left against the right, and the moral panic model sets the right against the left. And the traditional views on the right believe in sin, and therefore moral panics. The left does not. They do not inoculate against sin. They are sin carriers, super spreaders. They're wicked. So you must quarantine against the left. Move away. Try to diminish their influence. You see how that works? Whereas the left is like, these right-wingers are backwards and they're not vaccinated and they don't trust the news, so we got to stay away from them because they are virus super spreaders, mind virus super spreaders, conspiracy theorists. So a conspiracy theorist is someone who doesn't believe in I guess you would say they don't believe in the mainstream church of media, or mainstream media as state church. They reject it. So take a look at this, just to kind of get back to what I said earlier. This was an article from yesterday, and it was on 5/23, and the number 23 is encoded into the Final Destination series, where all the bad stuff happens. Inside the $100 million renovation of Seattle's iconic Space Needle. Now, why would they blow up the Space Needle? Why is this a 9/11-like event? Why is this significant? Pretty simple. The reason why I mentioned how in the opening scene it was like reminiscent of 9/11 or the Titanic movie is that these are metaphors for the West sinking, the Twin Towers sinking. And they're not quite done with this entire psyop, which takes place over subsequent generations of the fall of the Roman Empire. And Megalopolis gave a lot of this away in the opening scene about how you don't end an empire overnight. But they can't just go back and blow up the One World Trade Tower, just like they did the Twin Towers. It would be redundant. It wouldn't have the same impact. But the Space Needle is an analogous symbol to the One World Trade Tower. These are both symbols of the Tower of Babel and the idea of man reaching up into the heavens and man's hubris, a symbol of, I guess, man putting their agency over God's plan, and then God knocks it down. That's kind of the idea here. Too big to fail. So it's an important symbol in that regard. But again, $100 million were put into it. They modernized it. They put this new elevator. They just opened it yesterday. And it's called the Skyliner. Now let's go back to the movie that's out right now. Opening scene, 1968. Iris and her fiancé Paul attend the opening ceremony of Skyview, the high-rise restaurant tower. Then she has a premonition of the glass floor cracking and gas leak exploding and everybody dying. But again, just how coincidental is this that a movie about the opening of the Space Needle coincides with the opening of the Skyliner elevator? Listen to this. Math Powerland, if you talk about it, it won't happen. You know, if that's true, then no, I can't. I've thought about this before. People have said this. If you keep talking about it, they're not going to do it. Why? They don't want my YouTube channel to get traffic? No, we're talking about a script that's written decades in advance. There's no changing it. It's incontestable. And they know, even if some of us tell the truth, that they're just going to erase us anyway. The system will clean up. their backstories. They will censor in reverse. I mean, they have this thing on lockdown. I have no illusions about, quote, waking people up. In fact, I want to leave them to their dreams. Tim Ostman says, don't listen much, but have you talked about Stavely? He rage quit Mandoozlement, and now he's selling houses. Good for him. I wonder why he quit. Did he quit because he realized it was just the misinformation effect, and he fell for a psyop? Or was it something else? Was he demonetized? Or maybe it was the final experiment. Maybe that got him. But the last I saw, he was bartending. And he seemed to be happy, sociable. So I thought, well, maybe he jumped into a reality that he likes and he's going to stay there. I'd like to see his rage quitting. How do you rage quit the Mandela effect? He never thanked me for debunking it, by the way. Erica Creech says, we were born into media manipulation. How far we unwind is probably not far enough. The ear trick correlates with the election results. And Gage Grossarm comes back with a new name. Yeah, Gage Grossarm, we're talking about the guy whose bicep was shot off by Kyle Rittenhouse. He was a communist burglar. Then you had the Strangler, the skateboard guy who was friends with Jacob Blake, coincidence, shot in the lung. And then you had the pedo, what was his name? Rosenbaum, who was Jojo Rosenbaum, the guy who was shot in the pelvis, like he didn't deserve it. People are like defending the guy. It's like, that's justice. It's poetic justice. Shoot the burglar in the arm. He'll never rob again. Shoot the strangler in the lungs. Poetic. And then you shoot the perv in the crotch. And there were people who were like mad at Kyle Rittenhouse. And I don't even think the story was true. And I think it's a good story. And for the people who are really hurt about it, it's like, well, take comfort in the fact that Jojo died doing something he loved. Chasing a minor. Kenosha was savage. That was one of my favorite psyops of all time. I hope we get another one. But Kyle Rittenhouse was a remake of Chris Kyle. So if you don't remember, Chris Kyle was like the, I guess he had the Guinness Book for headshots or kill shots. He was a Marine sniper. And he got all kinds of accolades for killing a bunch of people. Anyway, he claims that during Hurricane Katrina, he climbed on the Astrodome and he shot 30 looters. And at the time, he was treated like a hero. Oh, this guy's killing looters. Good guy. You know, don't want them stealing those TVs and stuff. Well, it turns out that Chris Kyle likely lied about that, but nobody really ever corrected it. I mean, there are so many stories he made up that were just absolute lies. But the point of it is, Chris Kyle was this American hero sniper who drove across state lines to stop looters. Kyle Rittenhouse, folk hero, made for TV hero for the right wing, went across state lines, stayed up past his bedtime, and became a folk hero. But Gage Grossarm changed his name to Paul Prediger. So even though he changed his name to an equally unique name, so it's like you're not even hiding that well, but after changing his name, somebody recognized him and ran him over in an SUV. So what does he do? He goes on the news. And he puts his face out there and he doxes himself. So now it's Paul Prediger, formerly Gage Grossarm, gets run over. And then he raises money on a GoFundMe. Tim Osman says, Brian Stavely removed all his videos and now is just talking about real estate in his local area trying to look professional. That's almost evidence of the Mandela effect, to be honest. Like, let's say you believed in the Mandela effect. And you're like, reality's shifting and belief creates reality. And here I am, scraping by a living on YouTube, constantly getting censored for calling the news fake. Maybe if I can concentrate on CERN, I can shift myself into a reality where I'm selling real estate, which is where you would go to if you were just thinking instant get rich quick. So now we're in a new reality where Stavely's always been a real estate agent. He was never a Mandela effect pusher. I hope he does well with it. And I hope he recognizes that Centerville and Centreville both exist. Diana Southard says Petri dish, Kyle, and Greta. That needs to be on a trading card. A Petri dish with a little Kyle and a Greta, because both of them were spawned on January 3rd, 2003. Explain that. Explain how Kyle Rittenhouse and Greta Thunberg were born on the same day. And they were equally annoying paragons of the worst aspects of their respective sides of the political spectrum. Poster childs for everything that's crazy about each side. You got Greta and Kyle, and they have the same birthday. That's proof that our history is scripted and it's a bunch of actors on the world stage, or astrology's a thing. Tim Osman says, I remember Stavely being a slob talking about the Mandela psyop, but now he's a real estate agent. Maybe the residue was him, right? Yeah, now it's a debate. Did he ever do that? But did he ever admit that he was wrong? Or is now it's just kind of like an undercover thing? If I'm ever proven wrong about anything that I say here, I will admit it. I'm like, hey, I got to tell you guys, I'm sorry, but mainstream media was telling the truth this entire time. No lies. Ever. Like, I would backtrack on everything, story by story. I would hold a candlelight vigil for all the victims that I denied. I would apologize in formal letters, tearfully. I'd apologize to all the Sandy Hookers and all the other actors for diminishing their pain by monetizing their pain. But I'm sorry, the facts don't support that. And that's where I'm headed. I'm interested here in the facts. I would have no problem if there weren't any lies and we didn't live in a heavily propagandized worldview that is functionally a religion. Yeah, I live in a world of Nasatologists, and they don't know that it's a religion. And they're fundamentalists about it. Constant Elevation says, I could have sworn Stavely went door to door handing out big checks. Now, this is an important discussion because I still sometimes get Mandela-affected people who will say, I remember Ed McMahon gave out big checks. Okay, well, where are the descendants? Like, I don't have any rich friends that say, well, our family came into wealth in the 80s when Ed McMahon gave my great-grandmother a big fat check. Like, you don't find the residual wealth of that. But when somebody tells me Ed McMahon used to hand out big checks, I remember it. I will agree with them. I will say, okay, I don't think you're lying. And you are recalling this image. But the question is this reality? Or did your mind conflate something that you were prompted to imagine with your recollections? It's called interrogator bias, retroactive interference, misinformation effect. So the Mandela effect is a combination of misinformation effect, interrogator bias, which is how they frame the question, and the retroactive interference of the real memories. And if you use the AI art generators, you're like typing in a prompt, and then you get the image. When somebody asks you a question, do you remember the swirly on the F in the Ford logo or not? When someone asks you that question, those words become like a prompt, and your imagination brings up in your head the Ford logo without a swirly. Because you're asked, do you remember it with the swirly or without? So now you have this prompted imagining in your mind that gets confused with your recollection, with your memory of it. And the more you think about it, the more you solidify the false version. And this is something that's explained pretty well by the Innocence Project, who've done a lot to reveal how many people have been wrongfully convicted due to faulty eyewitness testimony, which was faulty because of the way the interrogation was handled. And that's all we're looking at with the Mandela effect, is we're looking at an easy-to-explain phenomenon where people are actually given false memories. So they're victims of misinformation. So the memories are, in a way, they do remember it, but they're remembering a lie. Okay, going through your comments. Citizen Z says, people see a Mandela effect and they think they experience the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And that's how it works, though. And then here's another thing, too. It's a loaded question fallacy. So the loaded question assumes that the premise itself is valid. And they'll do this thing, and Stavely would do this. He would ask somebody, do you remember Jif or Jiffy peanut butter? And the person would say, I don't have a memory of that. Do you remember Ed McMahon? I don't remember. Do you remember a cornucopia on your Fruit of the Loom? And a person will go through 20 or 30 Mandela effects, and then they find one. I'm like, yeah, Lassie fell down the well. Everybody knows. And now suddenly they're Mandela affected. Well, it shouldn't work that way. There wouldn't be different effects for different people, and they've never been able to explain that. And I have on audio in one of my files, I do have Brian Stavely saying he remembers Timmy in the well. Well, that's a false memory. So I'm not calling him a liar, but he constructed a memory of poor little Timmy at the bottom of a well. And I ask, because he said everybody knows Timmy fell down the well. I ask every person who claims to believe this, how did they get him out? Nobody's been able to supply an answer. Was it a rope? Was it a crane? How did they get Timmy out of the well? So what I found too is that the memories, so-called, are shallow. So when they say, I remember this, it's a very shallow memory. It's like a JPEG, just an image. There's no substance behind it, though. There's no story. Chris Lee Airy says, it's all rigged. My mom wastes her money on that garbage. When they announce the supposed winner, they're either an actor or anonymous. I've seen that rabbit trail people have gone down about how rigged lottos are. Just a way to surreptitiously tax the poor. I'm just saying, if somebody's wealth came from an Ed McMahon check, like that would be something that people would know about. Jennifer Reeves says, I have a friend that swears it was mirror, mirror on the wall. And that's faulty eyewitness testimony. When they say, I remember it, well, perhaps and something else too, many of these memories are things people picked up as a child, before you could even spell words, before you could even write a paragraph. I mean, you're a little child, and your memories of what you saw on a Disney movie shouldn't be considered reliable. But people will say, I remember it, and what they're remembering is vague at best. And I get this all the time. And what we're doing here is we're just trying to clarify our claims and how we make our claims. And I'm comfortable rejecting claims that don't have evidence attending them. So if you're going to say, I was in New Jersey in January and I saw a bunch of drones fly over my house. Some people would say, oh, those are probably just government drones, secret projects, or UFOs. I'm going to say, where were you? What time? Did you take a picture? And why not? Because generally the people don't take their cameras out for these things, because we can raise our standards of evidence. Because what you can do is you can take the direction they're facing, metadata from the photos, cross-reference it with flight trackers, and you can say, well, no, those drones that you saw were actually, quote, airplanes. And you can actually determine which planes that you saw and misidentified. Erica Creech says, I remember when Tim didn't show himself on streams. No, actually, this was a video stream at the very beginning. And then around 2018, my biggest anti-fan, Marcus Goldfinch, started downloading my content and uploading it to his own channel. And he fraudulently sent a letter to YouTube claiming to be me. And he was able to take that claim because he bought timosmond.com and he had the email address, and he convinced them he was me, and he even said, that's my voice speaking. And that's how he was able to censor this channel dozens and dozens of times, all on false copyrights. So I stopped putting videos up because they would be misused. I obtained a copy of the emails that he sent to YouTube. That's the basis for my lawsuit, which is not over yet. It's far from over. In fact, I was at the Dollar Tree and I found just to show you it's not over yet. This is a decapitated red Power Ranger. So if you know anything about the red Power Ranger, the suit or something is cursed. You can look it up, the curse of the red Power Ranger. Everybody who has played the red Power Ranger has come to some untimely demise. One of them got caught up financially and ended up kidnapping an older couple, tying them to an anchor and throwing them overboard after getting them to sign their assets to him. Another red Power Ranger was thinking his friend was flirting with his girlfriend, and he killed his friend with a samurai sword. And then another red Power Ranger got into some trouble and ended up self-castrating in prison. And then another red Power Ranger nearly beat his wife to death and then committed suicide before the police showed up. And then another Power Ranger is in prison for COVID loan fraud. So I'm going down all the different red Power Rangers that have come to an untimely end. Well, one of the Power Rangers that I didn't name is Marcus Goldfinch, our biggest anti-fan. When he's a New Zealander and an actor, and for several years he played as the body double, the stunt double for the Red Ranger. And so I'm like, that's interesting. When is the curse going to catch up with him? And so I found this red Power Ranger and I absent-mindedly scissored the head off of it. And I haven't been able to find it. But anyway, the curse of the red Power Ranger. And he set up for it because what he had done by committing this fraud is he had identified himself, admitted to the crime, and the following chain of lawsuits over the last few years have kind of caused him to go into more or less into hiding. Yeah, that's a Dollar Tree Power Ranger. I'll find the head here later. But I'm just pointing out that, yeah, I'm still working on this project. I don't talk about it as much. One other thing, too. He and his business partner at Marco Polo 501c3, the company that was publishing Hunter Biden's laptop, they claimed that some FBI agents trying to intimidate them killed a cat and left it on Garrett Ziegler's front door with a threatening note. So Garrett Ziegler and his business partner, Marcus Goldfinch, Red Power Ranger, reportedly found a dead cat and a threat, and they used this to raise money for their legal defense because they spent $300,000 defending themselves from Hunter Biden, who hilariously dropped the lawsuit a few months ago. So they spent $300,000 for nothing. But anyway, I called the chief of police in Altamont, Illinois. And I said, hey, can you look into this address, this name? Have there been any reports about death threats accompanied by mutilated animals? And the chief of police did his research. He called me back and he said, no, there were no police reports, nothing about dead cats left on anybody's porch. And it's a small town. And he knew the neighborhood. And I thought, that's interesting because look. And I sent him a link to the website where they have a picture of the dead cat. And they have a picture of the threatening note. And it's all published. And they use it to raise money. So I contacted PETA. I filed an FBI report. I've contacted a few animal rights organizations. And I said, we need to find out from Garrett Ziegler's mother what they did with the dead cat so we can go dig it up and do a necropsy and find out who killed it. Was it poisoned? Was it strangled? Who killed the cat? And then who disposed of it? And this implicates the Red Power Ranger. Anyway, that was like a little over a month ago. And this shouldn't just be swept under the rug. Because let's say they didn't kill a cat. That it's a fake photo. Which I don't think it is. But let's pretend that it is for a moment here, hypothetically. If that's the case, they still lied to their 300,000 supporters to raise money for lawfare. So it's wrong. dead cat or not. But this cat Doe is kind of one of my causes. I want justice for cat Doe. You know, John Doe, Jane Doe. It's what we call the unidentified. All right, let's continue. I've been off and on lately, but that's just because I've been catching up on the PSYOP trading cards. But we're at the point now where I think we're going to be on a regular schedule. Linda Curtis said, I found a series that perfectly portrays mainstream media, MSM Plus and MSM Minus. It's called Outpost. I think you would enjoy it. Has anybody here seen Outpost? One of the ways that I frame these conversations is describing our perspective and how we see things from this perspective. So the people who see the Trump headwind as fake, the reason why they can't arrive at any kind of ultimate truth from this, why they can't extrapolate anything, is because they're in the MSM box. They're in the internalized Truman Show, the mainstream mediation. And if their best explanation here is to add on to the story, like, okay, well, this was fake, but this guy was really killed and they killed a patsy, that's conspiracy theory. And you would call that MSM plus. So it's the mainstream version, but to fill in the holes, they add a bunch of stuff. So the conspiracy theorists are actually wrong fundamentally. The position we take is MSM minus, which means we subtract what can't be verified and then start from there. So our starting point isn't, let's assume this happened and build on that. Another way of describing this would be the majority of people live with their noses pressed up against the big TV screen, the broadcast reality that we get. You know, if you look at it as one big picture, everyone has their face up to the screen, meaning they're not taking in any peripheral information. And if it's not coming through the screen, it's not getting into their personal Truman Show. Conspiracy theorists recognize that the story is not complete. It's full of lies. So what do? Well, they go closer to the screen. They actually step into the box. So they're deeper in the program. Our position is to socially distance from the screen. So media skeptics are actually 6 feet away from the screen. So we're looking at the people with their noses pressed up against it. Those are the mainstreamers. Then we're looking at the people inside the box, wrapped up in their woke nightmares, and that would be the MSM plus, the red pillars, the political activists. But we're outside the box. Now, on top of the box, the programmers. And ultimately, we don't know everything, but we can ascertain that there's levels to it. And I make the point, too, that the programming class is mixed in with the programmers. Most of them are likely 98% programmed. Only let out in that specific area of interest where they're operating. So just because somebody's involved in a Department of Homeland Security fake school shooting simulation doesn't mean they know anything about the moon landings being faked, or wouldn't mean that they know anything about what really went on with the September 11th attacks or COVID, for example. These things are highly compartmentalized. Kate Perry knows space is fake. And I have no problem with Kate Perry. I realize here that she's associated herself with feminism and Clinton. And that's the reason why the woke right has such a hate for her right now. They're criticizing her every dance move and everything else, but it's all political. Andrea says, we watch the screen. They meditate in front of it like it's their guru. And something else, too. There are some people say, oh, I don't watch the news. You guys are just, some even say that I'm paying too much attention to it. But I'm like, no, there's only a couple classes here, a couple categories. The majority of people are misinformed. There's no alternative. If you're in the box, you are misinformed. What we are, since we are separating misinformation from real and fake, we're separating the two, is we are informed, which means we know it's misinformation. The people who don't pay attention to the news at all are under-informed. So you're better off being informed than under-informed. And being under-informed is not a viable alternative to being misinformed. Like, it's not any better of a position. Because when something big happens, you're going to be as lost as they are. Glenn says the woke right, there's no one on the right who is woke. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I brought up this connection between the far right, far left, and the political horseshoe, and how the red pill Great Awakening is approximately the same thing as wokeism in many ways. The just different nomenclature. And I've been discussing this for a couple of years. I've been describing how the right wing is all going to be closed borders, closed skin. Left is open borders and, open skin, vax them, etc. And how these attitudes are evident in every one of their major political opinions. And it's a consistent thing. It's a consistent box. But the concept of wokeness refers to being awake to how things really are as opposed to those who are sleeping. So the leftists who are, quote, woke are aware of systemic oppression and racism and the real histories that the sleepers are unaware of. Now contrast that with the conspiracy theorist red pill movement. Oh, the normies are blue pill dreamers in the matrix, in their matrix pods. They don't care about chemtrails and the deep state. But we're awake to that, and we're going to save the world from the cabal at the top of this thing. And at the ultimate point of it, you've got Jews. On the woke left side, at the ultimate height of it, is whiteness. So whiteness contrasted with Jewishness as constructs scapegoated for being the central oppressors. Now, this is something I've noted for some time, but in the last week, the term woke right has gone viral. And funnily, a lot of people on X are saying there's no such thing. There's no such thing. And the reason why is that those who fall into that category of, quote, wokeness don't want that label because it's embarrassing. But yeah, I can define left and right. Essentially, what we're talking about here are a conflict of these are two different visions. And specifically in America, left versus right, the left is associated with progressive utopianism, which is revamping everything, and the right is attached to this traditional view of the idealized past. That's what MAGA appeals to, make America great again, as in before certain societal changes. And what are these changes? Well, feminism, and what it's done to the nuclear family, civil rights, desegregation, all these things that were brought forth as advances, as progress by the progressives, are rejected by the conservative traditionalists. That's why they emphasize religion over media. So the split is progressive utopianism married to big government and globalist government, one world stuff, versus nationalism and the view that things were better before we tried to change everything. Glenn Clark said, I'm glad I stopped listening to Tim on a regular basis. He's arrogantly wrong about the world. No, I'm not wrong about this. And what I'm pointing out here is that the far right's views on oppression mirrors the left. And I'm not the one making this up. I've pointed this out for a couple of years. But in the last few days, specifically, but in the last few weeks, the term woke right has gone viral despite a lot of people resisting it, because anybody that's on Team Hitler, anybody that is promoting the idea of replacement theory, fall into the category of woke right. So if you believe you're being oppressed by Jews, if you believe you're being replaced or you're being white genocided, yeah, you're in that box. If you believe in the deep state and the cabal and the white hats fighting the black hats, you fall in that category. If you line up behind Patriot Front and Proud Boys, you're in that category. I'm not political. I'm not in this political horseshoe. I recognize it for what it is. But the people who fall into that category don't want to own it. It doesn't change the facts. Jordan Peterson was just talking about this with Matt Walsh. So you could plug your ears. Glenn Clark says, woke right, Tim is making up things going viral. Look, I'm going to take note of this, Glenn. You can laugh. All you can do is laugh. But one, I didn't make this up. And two, I merely pointed out how things are. And now it's being reckoned with as people are noticing here. Wait a minute here. The far right has adopted the same tactics and attitudes and victim mentality as the far left. And I frame this as critical race theory versus critical Jew theory. And the only people in denial of woke right are woke right. It's actually comical. So you can think you're laughing at me, but you're not going to stop it. It has nothing to do with me. I've always been critical of soy boys and Proud Boys and Patriot Front and any of these useful idiots marching in the streets. Anybody still voting is foolish at this point. So you can say what you want, but reality denialism is not something I engage in. And if you're going to say that woke right isn't going viral, that it's not being talked about, that it's not being essentially force memed, then you're just not paying attention. And just because you don't know anything about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's so many people who are like, well, what does this mean? This can't be. Here's one. Okay, right-wing wokeism. Oh, here's another one. This is from AFR.com. Same energy, opposite direction, the rise of the woke right. And here they have one of its poster children, Laura Loomer. The radical MAGA right has a way of looking at the world that chimes with the liberal left. Glenn Clark says, I'm woke left, he's delusional. Look, you can deny reality, Glenn, all you want, but reality doesn't care about your feelings. The facts literally don't care. And if you're getting unhinged, don't blame it on me. There are many people smarter than me publishing scholarly articles on the rise of the woke right. And it's funny. These identitarian politics on the right have been out in the open, easy to see for a long time. I've been calling it out, and I feel somewhat vindicated that everything I wrote about in 2022 is being noticed. I actually put out an ebook. I took this out of Lie World. So Lie World is a longer book that encompasses predictive programming, the meta script, and conspiracy theories and how these things are divided. But I took out a section and I separately published it as the woke right, conservatism with a victim complex. And right now it's number 304 in radical political thought, 345 in nationalism. So you can argue with my ideas all you want. I've published them out there. I'm not trying to run from them. But I've been accurate is all I'm saying. Now, Glenn Clark says, does the media know what left truly means? Look, you can flail, you can screech, you can emote, you can do whatever you want, but you're not going to change the reality of the fact that they have implemented a model to capture all minds in a compartmentalized system. Tucker Carlson, labeled by one observer as the undisputed spiritual leader of the woke right, stated in an interview with Matt Walsh, everything is rigged against white men. If you believe that you're being oppressed on the basis of your sex and gender, then you have the woke oppression perspective, the woke victims politics. So you're saying the system is rigged against me because I'm a black woman. Yeah, that's a woke left position. The system is rigged against me because I'm a white male. That's a woke position. I remember I pointed out guns and wombs. The leftist toxic feminists want to grab your guns on the right. And on the right, the toxic masculinity right wants to regulate their wombs. So if you look at this from a Freudian perspective, you have the toxic aspect of male and female dominant mentalities trying to regulate each other's guns and wombs. Glenn Clark says, you listen to Matt Walsh, you normie. Okay, well, you're just uninformed. And honestly, I listen to everybody, but I don't have mind aids. So listening to somebody doesn't mean I believe them. I listen to everybody to Here's the thing, and maybe you don't get it, and that's fine. I honestly don't care. When we're talking about the people in front of the screen, I'm looking at them, and what they're watching, so I can know what's going into their heads. And by looking at your reactions, I can tell that you're inside the screen on the right side in that subset. So I can tell just by your commentary here what you think. And by your reaction. And the fact that you're going ad hominem instead of addressing the substance of my claims. So it's very weak. Very weak response. Is very tepid. I don't know what your overall point is. And I don't think you have the guts to call in. But if you want to, I'll open up phones. But I'm not here to debate with wokies. I don't care if you're left woke or right-wing woke or red pill woke. Look, anti-geoengineering is right-wing woke. As much as climate change activism is a woke position. And it is. Because it's about the systemic destruction of the environment by this oppressive system. We're talking about critical consciousness here. Glenn Clark says you are arrogant. Okay, I don't know what your problem is, honestly. But like your opinions here don't really have any currency. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I had this anonymous guy on the internet who's a fringe right conspiracy theorist who thinks he's oppressed, doesn't like my opinions. Like, who really cares? I think we banned him before. He accused me of being mainstream because I was using AI. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm a publisher of content. I use the best tools available to me. And I'm not going to be shamed into not using these tools. Like, go back to snail mail and fax machines and email lists if you want to. Okay, let's continue. Diana Southard says, are the black female statues a pic of Betty Pearson? Okay, I saw those statues. I don't know the significance 100%, but back to Mickey 17. In Mickey 17... the Trump-esque character is eliminated, and one of his antagonists is a black female lead actress who's right there with Mickey 17, and she's the one who takes his place. So that's another common theme. Mickey 17, Civil War, and of course Fallout, where the Trump-esque character removed, and then you have this replacement. Okay, let's see here. Mazel says, if you're not woke, you're a bigot. I don't know, he's way behind. Yeah, look, I don't debate people who are in the political horseshoe because they're triggered. They're victims. Like, the people who are scared of chemtrails, they're victims. The people who are laying down in the streets to stop traffic because they think that Gaia can't take it anymore, they're victims. They're mind war casualties. And I'm not. And so we have this guy coming in here just call me names, call me arrogant or whatever. Like, what is he talking about? And then claiming that woke right isn't going viral. So I show him evidence of it, and then he just flails. Like right now, he's probably on his floor, literally flailing and frothing at the mouth. And we can't help him. You can't help people like that. If they have mind aids, they're just susceptible. You got to quarantine them. Or quarantine yourself. Or get inoculated. And Mind War inoculation is free here at Infinite Plane Radio. It's all mental. There's no needles involved. Okay, Space Needle now has a double-decker all-glass elevator. Synchromorpheus was bringing up something about it. How this article describes the structure when you go up. On one side, you can see the Queen Anne above the Museum of Pop Culture and the International Fountain. On the inside, you can see the hoist cable, the guide rails, the magnets, the counterweights, whizzing by the structure's skeleton and winding double helix staircase. Now, this description kind of mirrors the main character's view of it as she's going up in this elevator in this recently released Final Destination. But again, this opened yesterday, so my eyes have been on that scene because of the movie. Also, the Museum of Pop Culture used to be the Electronic Music Project, the EMP. So you have the EMP associated with the nuke itself. A photo from Como 4 drone demonstrates the crews putting the finishing touches on the new all-glass double-deck elevator at the Seattle Space Needle on May 22nd. So they just finished it. The Space Needle's new Skyliner elevator is the first of its kind in North America and opens to the public on May 23rd. And another aspect to it is that the $100 million, the Century Project, many of the predictive clues about the Space Needle have been strongly correlated with the number 100. And the cent, like Century Project, but even the cent, the penny, in this movie, it's all about the penny. Plain Dakota says, with more subs come more normies. Yeah, look, I wouldn't be surprised, but I doubt it. I don't know why a normie would be interested. I find it really peculiar. I don't know why the confused would listen. Like, if people are still confused, is it real? Is it fake? Is it a false flag? Did some people die? I'm like, look, if you're still hitting the Q-pipe, if you're still high on red pills, if you're still on the hopium, if you're still following anybody in the alt-right, woke right, red pill right, what are you doing off-world stage? It's very questionable. And we don't want them anyway. Think about it. Let's say we have 1,000 deprogrammed minds in the think tank. And one day we say, hey, let's enlarge this tent. Let's let in the Mandela affected. Okay, well, now we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1 by people who don't know what's real and can't process logical fallacies and screen out bad ideas. In other words, a bunch of MAIDS patients. We just quarantined against that. So we don't need that. We don't need to wake people up. We don't need to convert people. There are enough people who have figured it out that we just need them all in the same think tank to get the best results. And that's a long-term project. I'm not in a rush, but I do think all the best minds in media deconstruction will find their way here at some point. And I do think it could be exponential. I understate how many people are very close, who are just 1 or 2 guardrails away from reaching the off-world stage perspective. If you haven't been to autohoax.com, I highly recommend it. It's a hub. It's the Hoax Report. And the Hoax Report is where you go for the latest PSYOPs, media hoaxes, and predictive programming analysis. And you can also listen to our live streams there. Russian satellite intended for Venus falls to Earth. We talked about that one, just like in the movie Megalopolis. One of the connections I made was in Megalopolis, you see the Statue of Liberty in the background. And some have said the Statue of Liberty is covertly a shrine to Venus. Could be. Final Destination is on 611 Washington State. That's a new video by Jurassic Liars. So if you listen frequently, you'll hear Jurassic Liars. He often calls in, and he does a lot of media analysis of the news, where I tend to focus on movies. And he has a YouTube channel where he frequently uploads and he deletes. So if you want to catch his work, it's really easy to find. Just go to the Hoax Report. JC threatens Trump and the 8-4 Trump twin assassination. Now that's one I'll have to watch. So we have the James Comey with the 8647 threat. And let's not forget, that was 8,647 days after 9/11. Long-term planning here, where JC threatens Trump exactly that many days, 8647. And I double-checked that. I asked Grok. But something else, too. In the Mickey 17 movie, it's Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 who are planning the assassination of the Trump character. So another twin reference. Navy ship hits Brooklyn Bridge. I haven't seen that one. I'll have to look. I think that's a Jake the A-hole video. Let's see. I'm going through Fakeologist forums. 50 years of race war in South Africa. Lynn Ertel on South Africa. Lynn is a favorite caller here. And she's a great example. She's an exemplar of MSM+. And I don't hold it against people. You know, if you're in a box because of conditioning and programming and you've never stepped outside of it, It's not an attack on one's intellect. It's just a situational awareness thing. And do people even care? Is there a cost to not caring? No, there really isn't. In fact, there is more of a cost to paying attention and caring and noticing it. Erica says, I don't see it as arrogance. You think 99% of the people are confused. You, of course, could be confused, but you can't run a show without... Look, I'm not confused. And if I was, I would acknowledge it. I'm addressing the things that are confusing unless you add more facts, which often leads to non-belief. One point I can make very confidently here is this. Fake news exists. Not just talking about Trump's fake ear wound, but in general, fake news exists. We can all agree, right? Simulated news events presented as real. PR stunts, hoaxes. These exist. Not only do they exist, but these are the events that take the most air out of the room. They take all the attention. They steer the main narratives. And these can be big psyops, lots of little psyops, general psyop narratives, epidemics of school shootings. But the fake events in the aggregate are the dominant influence in what goes down in the news. Now, what happens in the news goes into our history books. And as long as we've been looking at the fake news, the contemporary news as it's happening, we're following everything. We're noting, okay, this fake stuff goes into the historical record, goes into the history books. If you pick up a textbook and look up what happened with the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, Littleton, guess what you're going to find? The official stories. So the official fake news becomes history. So that therefore we can confidently say that we share in a collective delusion. It's a consensus reality and agreed upon delusion. Most people don't know how delusional it is. So when I'm saying that we live in a distorted worldview that represents the interests of a worldview monopoly, that's just a correct observation. And I'm not adding on to anything. I'm just extrapolating on what's clearly observable. And so what we see here is heavy-handed control over the present, giving them total control over the past, and therefore control over the future. And the fake news events are augmented by the entertainment media, which collectively form our mental ecosystem, our internalized simulation of the world. So again, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. But the fact of it is, the fake news is uncorrected by design. So we may laugh at Trump and the ketchup packet on his head, the squib. We may laugh at the fact that they molded it off of Braveheart and the propaganda is so blatant. But the fact is, that's what happened according to the consensus. So the consensus is the world stage. That's the agreed upon version of things. So when I'm saying that 99% of the people are confused, I'm like, no, it's actually 100%. The objectivists come along as a philosophy that's meant to break away from the confusion of mysticism and bad philosophy and bringing in Aristotelian logic. And what happened to the objectivists? They filtered everything through the lens of mainstream media and mainstream history. So there you go. Objectivism became subjectivism from day one. So that person who was getting mad at me in here would reside in MSM+. So he knows the mainstream is bad, but he has the conspiratorial bent. And woke left or woke right, those are all pluses. Those are all additional. It's this because they're awake. So that not just normies, they also have the awakening, critical consciousness, which you get from universities or from red pills on the internet. Depends on whether you veer left or right. So when I say that red pill is the equivalent of leftist wokeism, 100%. And all these issues I point out, look, if you're anti-vax, anti-geoengineering, yeah, you're a wokester. And if you don't like the label, that's not my problem. But I'm happy for it. I am glad that the woke right label has emerged because I can use it now to accurately describe people's positions and discredit certain things that need to be discredited. Till says, Tim, don't you think the media and entertainment industry promote and glorify interracial relationships on a massive scale? The impact on the Kardashians alone had on interracial and trans. Well, I would say that everything in media is a influence operation. Look back to Edward Bernays. I say we're on planet Netflix because of the influence of Netflix or entertainment in general, but how the co-founder, first CEO of Netflix, is related to Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. And that doesn't mean anything specifically, but just consider the connotations here. Edward Bernays, father of public relations, PR stunts, changing society. Look how much they've changed society since the 1984 was a horror story. There was a point where people thought, oh, it'd be really terrible if 1984 came true and we lived in a total surveillance society. Now here we are in 2025, and privacy is kind of a thing of the past. I don't think it's even assumed, nor is it even a value anymore. No, people cannot separate from their screens, but it's not because it's been planted there by Big Brother and you got to dodge it and hide. No, they sold you on the lifestyle of self-surveillance. They changed the entire society to cause it to not only surveil itself with video, but they're also reading your thoughts with all your social media posts. But as far as, quote, interracial stuff, whatever you said, that's wokeism. And it has to do with blood purity. Like, there's a strong connection here between anti-vax, anti-Semitism, and the idea of a Christian identitarianism, pure blood. Oh, the vaxxed are goo bloods. We're pure blood. We're natural. And then the open borders are going to bring in foreigners, which will contaminate our blood. Or the vax will penetrate our skin borders and turn us into goo bloods. So the blood purity psyop is another consistent facet of this thing, and that's why you see anti-vaxxers are also anti-immigrants. And I pointed this out, the hypocrisy of it. They'll say, birth rates are going down, we're running out of people. Well, look, you got 20 million people from Uganda who want to move in here. And they're like, oh, we don't want them. I thought you said you were worried about running out of people. Why don't you say what you really mean? But they don't. So no, if you're falling for that stuff, I'm just saying you're falling for a psyop. The idea of this idealized, like, racial purity, ethno-fascism. Eric Dubay was promoting that at one point. He was like, Europeans need to go to Europe. Africans go to Africa. Canadians go to Canada. And down the line. And I'm like, wait a minute here. You're in Thailand living a very multicultural life as a yoga instructor. Who are you to lecture people when you're not in Europe having white babies for the fatherland? So it's a huge hoax. But as far as the race war psyops and these narratives, yeah, it's actually, I think politics trumps race, but they've tied it in specifically here to these two conflicted worldviews, epitomized by Trump and his vision and Obama and his vision, which would be also correlated with 1776 and 1619. And this has been, I pointed this out for some time, but this was heavily underlined with Leave the World Behind, an Obama production about the White Lion ship hitting the shore, the 1619 emergency signal. It was all about America's racial reckoning. And these two visions, are they, what's going to happen with these two visions in conflict? Chris Lee says, I'm anti-immigrant and anti-vax. Yeah, it would follow. You see, because the people who are open borders are open skin. The people who are closed borders are closed skin. I would also venture to guess that you either think aliens are fake, or if they're real, they're demons and working with the government. Whereas the left sees the aliens as benevolent space brothers to bring us blessings and culturally enrich the human race. So if you're anti-alien, you're on Tucker's side of the fence. Aliens are bad. If you're progressive, aliens represent the ultimate in, I think, this idea of the one world-ism, blending everything. But yeah, if you're stuck on racial purity, like, I don't know what you're doing here, because that's another one of these big psyops. It's like a religion, and it takes for granted a lot of stuff on the world stage to be true that aren't necessarily true. And I often point out how both sides are always in agreement, but they disagree on the cause. So Elon Musk is screaming, "Oh, it's a population crisis," and everybody's agreeing, yeah, it is. But the people on the right say we're running out of babies, and the people on the left say there's too many people. Well, they can't both be right. Bill Gates can't be a villain and a savior. Elon Musk can't be a villain and a savior, but somehow they both fulfill both roles depending on where you are in the big box. Chris Lee says, I don't believe in aliens. They could be the Nephilim here on Earth. But if you did believe in aliens, you would think they were evil. And the Nephilim would be, in fact, evil. So evil that God flooded the world to get rid of them. But the idea of being against aliens, like space aliens, is consistent with you being against aliens from other countries. And you're against alien infusions into the DNA. Or the injection into the blood. So what I'm saying here is that closed borders, closed skin, Space Force, closed in the sky, another Trump thing. And then also the general quarantining of the sides against one another. It's all built into this. Rural versus urban. Get out of the cities has been one of the rallying cries of the right. Plain Dakota says, I don't want to live in India, in Canada. It's already here, so what can I do? I would say that all of these complaints about nationalism stuff, I can't really help you. Like, I honestly don't care. I don't think it's an issue. But maybe it's just because I live in a sanctuary city. So we've always had an infusion of immigrants and that kind of thing. And I think the threat of immigrants is mostly just xenophobia. Because that's what binds people is fear. So now you're afraid of aliens, you're afraid of immigrants, you're afraid of needles. Where does the fear end? And if you are a believer in like replacement theory and you don't have like 10 kids, I don't really care what you have to say. I mean, you got so many incels out there like Nick Fuentes, king of the incels. He's like, we got to repopulate America with white babies. It's like, okay, you're a 40-year-old virgin and you say that girls have cooties. Like, how are you going to lead this repopulation? Ryler05 says, the new final destination is 110 minutes, a Twin Tower code. Good call. I noticed Mickey 17 is 2 hours and 16 minutes, which has a lot of connotations to the head wound, if you follow JL. I think that race warriors, though, in general, if you're a race warrior, closed border, anti-immigrant, anti-vax, you're just woke. You're right woke, or woke right. And that view of reality is based on the idea that you all need to wake up to the real version of things so you can fight the system. And it's interesting, too, because I think at the top of it, you're obviously blaming Jews because you're saying, oh, they're the ones who are causing the borders to open because it's a war against us. And they consider immigrants to be biological warfare. I mean, I follow these various ideologies to see where they lead. And at the end of it, I realized that the political horseshoe model or theory, the political horseshoe theory is quite literally a model they built into this. And you shouldn't be so programmed to where you express one opinion and now there's a cluster of opinions that I know that you have. Belief clusters. And a lot of the people who have these belief clusters don't even know. Like, oh, I'm a one-issue guy. I just hate chemtrails. Okay, well, now you also hate this ethnic group. And now you're also a sexist. Like, can you believe in chemtrails and not be a sexist? I know these things don't sound connected, but kind of no. Like, can you be a climate change alarmist and not be a sexist? Well, if you look at the way these things are framed, toxic masculinity and its association with certain things, no, these things they all kind of lead into the same big boxes. I mean, I wouldn't say straightforward, if you believe in chemtrails, you are this, but for the most part, you're falling under a big umbrella. And these things matter. So let's say you go with, okay, I believe that the overuse of fossil fuels is going to be the death of the earth. and the death of mankind. Well, if you believe that, what underscores it? It's not just science. It's not just climate models, and there's so many models that they can make it fit anything. No, it's an entire critique against the West, against male-dominated society, so against patriarchy. So it is kind of sexist because it views now males as expressions of, quote, toxic masculinity. And then it goes into systemic racism, which is actually anti-white. So yeah, you could argue that the woke left is anti-white and anti-male. But in the same way that the far right is anti-woman, they promote trad wives, and they're actually anti-feminist. But my point is, these are perfect mirrors of each other. All right, moving on. Somebody said something with the glass flooring. Till says, people are people, good and bad on all sides, but you seem to cherry pick. No, I'm not. I'm actually just pointing out that most people are low information believers, and this is not something that is really all that debatable. People believe, based on cognitive bias, their side of the fence, and they trust the headlines. Most people aren't going that deep into this stuff. Most people are pretty shallow about it, but that's how the system works. You don't have to be deep. You just need to trust. But I have found it to be a consistent thing that the people who have one opinion on one of these political horseshoes is going to fit in every one of these other boxes, and I don't see any crossovers. You're not going to see a liberal worried about chemtrails. They're worried about CO2. You're not going to see a conspiracy theorist who's worried about the overuse of fossil fuels. You don't see these lines crossing. And it just tells me you're programmed. And if you're programmed and I identify you as such, it's not an attack, it's not a criticism, it's just an acknowledgement of where you are. Like, you can drive by a church on Sunday and recognize, okay, all these people have this worldview, these parameters. It's their program. They voluntarily choose it. Good for them. I choose deprogramming. Plain Dakota says stereotyping fallacy. Okay, tell me where I'm wrong, and we'll go from there. But I have been pointing out this pattern, the setup, the MSM box, the subsets, and it is accurate 100% of the time. That's why somebody can come in here crying about the vaccines, and I can be like, oh, let me guess. You think Bill Gates is going to blot out the sun? Well, what does one have to do with the other? A lot, actually, because these are part of the critical views. Critical race theory, it's this view that you're looking at everything through a certain lens. And in that lens, of course, it's whiteness. And the people who don't believe that whiteness is a problem, namely the white people, on the far right fringe, see Jewishness as the problem. So you see, these are dialectics, and they're set up. It's the perpetual war. And if you're falling into their dialectical mind games, then you're pretty much a dupe. It's a rigged game. And if you want to lose, play their rigged game. But I'm not playing it. And no, it's not a fallacy here. These are observations. So you're welcome to prove to me where I'm wrong. Show me an open border person that is anti-vax, or show me a closed border person that is pro-vax. Like, find me these unicorns, please. All I see are a bunch of lemmings and robots and default belief systems that people just adopt without thinking twice about it. They're so predictable that I predict people's reactions in advance. So when that helicopter crashed into that AA flight, I said, watch, left is going to blame Trump for deregulation of the airlines, and the right is going to blame DEI. And who did the right blame? DEI. They said, oh, it's a woman pilot. Then you had that other pilot crashing into the Hudson. Even though he was a Navy SEAL, because he was black, the right said it was DEI. Even Ann Coulter, it's DEI. But I'm predicting people's responses in advance. So no, the fact is my model that I apply here is predictable and consistent. So no, this is not the result of fallacious reasoning. Belief in the MSM box is the result of the argument, the appeal to authority fallacy, right up at the front. Ryler says, whiteness is a colonial construct. It's the watering down of culture and differences to where the only thing that separates us is skin color. Right. Well, it's this scapegoat that is used as the explanation for everything, if in the critical view from the left. But in the same way, the right blames Jews, Jewishness, or the QAnons blame the deep state. Same thing. These are analogous. All right, let's move on. President Trump retweeted this. All roads lead to Obama. Read truth if you want public military tribunals. Yes, because the woke right wants to see a bunch of Democrats get killed, executed. This has been a thing for some time, one of their visions. But here, you're seeing this juxtaposition of these two because, this is 1776 versus 1619. Till says, what model did you apply to the whale-sized clownfish? Yeah, when I saw that, I was admitting something here. This is why I'm saying I'm not arrogant. I'm like, look, I'm trickable. I got fooled by a whale-sized clownfish. Like, I recognize the fallibility of perception and how we can all be duped. What we're doing here is just being honest. And if you're being honest, you would have to admit that you don't have enough information to say something's true just because you saw it on TV. That makes you into a non-believer. But it's not the non-belief of the ignorant saying, well, I don't know, I don't believe. No, it's not low information disbelief. No, this is informed disbelief. Low information disbelief is garbage, just as bad as low info belief. The people who don't believe in panda bears, yeah, that's low information garbage, clickbait. If you really thought panda bears didn't exist, that's a major finding that everybody in the world would want to know. 8 billion people would want to know if that's true. So the least you could do is go to the zoo. The least you could do is talk to a biologist at the university. But they don't do this. They appeal to ignorance. They're not interested in more information. That's low information disbelief. And they use that, and those theories, those types of ideas get popularized to discredit the informed disbelievers. Disbelief is what you arrive at when you get more information. It shouldn't be the result of not enough information. Chris Lee says the USA is supposed to be entirely European with Christian values. Look, are you a Christian? And do you go to church? Because if you don't go to church, then I have to kind of question, like, well, what is exactly your claim to being a Christian? Like, who do you actually speak for? Like, internet Christians are an entirely different sect. Are you an ex-Christian? Are you a Candace Owens, Russell Brand, performative Christian because it's a purity test, virtue signaling? That's another woke thing. I'm a Christian nationalist. Okay, you're virtue signaling. Pure blood, pure nation, pure values. Look at me, Mr. Purity. So I kind of think you might be a little misplaced if you're in the only think tank on the internet with the off-world stage perspective and you're advocating wokeism, extreme political views. Like, we're not even playing politics and you're taking an extreme position. You're a semi-Christian? Okay, then you're going to hell. You're lukewarm. God won't have you. He says, I'm not a cucked one. I don't go to church. See, let me point this out too, because you're programmed, and this is not to be offensive. The anti-media view of the conspiracy theorist is only anti-mainstream, but they have their alternative media. And there's a mirror with the anti-church or anti-mainstream religion views with the same people. So you don't believe media because it's mainstream. You're not cucked, but you listen to alternative media. You're not a church-going Christian because you're not cucked, but you consider yourself a Christian. So basically, you're alt-Christian, alt-media. And no, I'm not lost. This is a box that you put yourself in, and this is a consistent pattern. I've picked it up with the alt-media and their attitude towards religion. It's always the same. It's like, no, you can self-inform. Do your own research. Do your own religion. Same thing, same pattern. So no, I'm not lost. I know where you are. See, I'm outside of the box looking in, and you're on the right side in the category subset of MSM plus. And that's why you're worried about race and racial purity and immigrants, or even talking about that stuff like it matters. And if you think it does matter, my question is, what are you doing here? Why would you be in the only think tank that disagrees with everything you believe? It's like, I got this hardcore ideology. I got to save the world from this group, and I got to have more babies of this race so we can become the dominant influence here. Then what are you doing here? What are you doing here in particular? Like, how did you find yourself in the area of media skeptics? Are you even a media skeptic? He says, Christian is part of the top Abrahamic religions. I don't believe in everything the KJV says. It's fixed. Right, alternative. So you basically, you don't trust the priests for the same reason you don't trust the pundits. You don't trust the church for the same reason you don't trust the media. But you trust your own mediation. You trust your own interpretation of the Bible. You see, so you're taking a subset of the mainstream. That's what I mean by MSM plus. It's a subset of the main. So you still accept the premise of the book, but you reject the mainstream interpretation. And you probably add on some other stuff, maybe some apocrypha. And when I say MSM, you don't have to be an MSM watcher. Mainstream mediation refers to the world stage. And what is that? That's the world stage that is performed in front of us, that exists against the backdrop of our distorted history that we all agree has been distorted. So we all have a shared consensus as to what happened yesterday, what happened 5 years ago. So we live in the post George Floyd COVID world, post 9/11 world. So if you look at where we are right now, we all agree this is where we're at. That's our collective shared worldview. That's the MSM perspective. But if you believe that the MSM perspective is lying, and that we never went to space, and that these are all psyops, well, then you're not in the MSM box. But where are you? Well, if you think it's lying, but you don't know what's behind the lies, or you're just going off of what you can verify, then you're going to take what's called the subtractive route, MSM minus, where you have to be comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't trust what they've said, but I don't know. I need more time to figure it out. But if you think that, yeah, they're lying, but these conspiracy theories explain it, well, then you're in the box of MSM plus. Thank you, Till. Appreciate it. And no, I'm not being defensive here, and I'm not making leaps. I mean, look, I invite critics, but please, instead of just telling me I'm crazy, tell me where I'm wrong. And so far, you have not. And so far, I have been 100% consistent. But no, I'm not being defensive. I'm just explaining things. Because I do find it weird when race warriors come in here, or anti-vaxxers come in here, or chemtrail alarmists come in here. Because this isn't really an environment where we entertain such things, but we just observe these as facets of the world stage. But no, I'm not being defensive. I mean, what would I have to be defensive about? Like, these aren't my beliefs. I'm actually just pointing out the media landscape, the internalized simulation. But making leaps to connect my own dots, I don't know about that. Like I said earlier today, more than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was discussing the bifurcation of the MSM box in explicit detail. And I put this in a few different books. I put it in Secret Religion of the Elite, but I've been describing this division and how intrinsic it is to the system. This is the perpetual war. And then I find that one of my phrases about right-wing wokeism and how it's a mirror of the left has now been mainstreamed. And somebody came in here, he was a little mad about it. He said it wasn't true. And so I provided evidence that it is true, and that even Jordan Peterson's talking about it, Matt Walsh is talking about it, two of the biggest names and voices in the right-wing media ecosystem. So to say that I'm connecting dots is not just wrong, but it's rather ignorant and kind of just pathetically defensive, to be honest. Because there's nothing you can do that's going to change the fact that the fringe side of the political spectrum on the conspiracy side does not have the intellectual high ground. They don't have the right answers. The red pill is a bunch of fear porn. And if you're addicted to fear porn and you're chopping up and snorting red pills and getting off on the phobias, the fears, the terror of existence, the nightmare, that's on you. Some people have bad taste in drugs. Till, okay, we got the revelation here. This explains it. Till says, all your nonsense numbers talk. Numbers would obviously imply a digital simulation. That's called appeal to the divine fallacy. You're inserting God. But instead of saying God, you're saying simulation. But it's a God construct. No, what I'm revealing here with the numbers talk, with the order of events and how the events that come out are correlating with the movies, I'm pointing out propaganda. It's not a simulation. If you think it's a simulation, you've been brainwashed. You're programmed. Did you know that simulation theory is a monotheistic metaphysical construct that has been packaged for alternative media to be a replacement God construct, and that the devil is AI? So I've noticed this. To the far right, the conspiracy theorists right, AI is the devil, but the simulation is the God construct. These are just new labels for old concepts. But what I point out time and again, you can't take my evidence and claim it for your simulation God. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You can't steal my homework. What we have aggregated for years now, consistently, what we have documented is the deliberate synchronization between entertainment and fake news. We predict it, we note it, we document it. You can't take that and say, oh, this proves my simulation. Sorry, your simulation is a Elon Musk endorsed New World Order religion for the lemmings. So no, we're not in a sim. Brian Stavely didn't switch realities to one where he's a real estate agent. No, he realized that his simulation theory was leading nowhere. Mandela effect offers no explanations. It's not predictive. Ryler says polytheism gave us civilization and justice. Monotheism gave us the Dark Ages. Well, I would say today that we live in a monotheistic construct. That mainstream mediation, this big box, is the monotheistic religion. And that the worldview monopoly that is broadcast to us is essentially the Bible. It's the worldview that we're all meant to share. And we're bound together by various God constructs, weapons of mass destruction. Ollie Goering says, Babylon working in the Pacific West region. Seattle got something to do with it. It has the elements of prestige of Los Angeles and the weirdness of Portland. Just a clue why it's ground zero for the reset. Well, I can confidently say I debunked simulation theory and the Mandela effect and chemtrails and QAnon. And if you still cling to any of these, or false flag theories, if you're still running around with theatrical blood on your hands, if you're still clinging to the idea that people are dying in these events, I've already discredited all these things, and I'm happy to debate it. But yeah, we do live in a de facto monotheism. I think the symbol of the monolith, which was 2001 Space Odyssey, but also the Monolith Hotel at Ground Zero, it represents this monumental work of synchronizing the dreaming mind with the waking mind, the movies with the news. The symbol of the sun and the moon, the eclipse over the monolith. Well, the monolith is the same dimensions as the movie screen. So that black monolith is in your pocket. It's your iPhone. It's the screen. The screen is like, essentially, it's the Bible of the state religion. It is the frame of reference that we all share, insofar as it's censored and they maintain a consensus, which is hard work for them because of people like us. But the monolithic worldview, what you get from the screen, is a fusion of fantasy, entertainment propaganda, and news media propaganda. But two into one, this fusion of the dreaming and the waking. We are living in an alternate reality game. We are living in a dream. We are living in a simulation created by monotheistic media, or monolithic media. That is, again, the de facto monotheism. Erica says, many are here because you're not Hollywood entertainment. People say a certain group runs Hollywood, but it's more like a picked group of secret society, not an ethnicity. Yeah, I mean, there are many explanations for why certain demographics excel in certain areas. Various reasons. But to attribute it to a conspiracy, like, so the woke right will say, well, this group is using Hollywood to promote degeneracy. So that goes into the idea of sinfulness and the impurity. And it's all about purity on both sides. They have different views on what constitutes sin and purity, though. But this is one of the central things. And they look at Hollywood entertainment and the news media as separate, which is also one of the things that we have to connect here. Is that not only do we not have like one particular group to blame for it, but we have to look at it all as monolithically controlled. What is really the distinction between Netflix and the news? You could watch Netflix and know what's happening in the news. Like, that's not an exaggeration. Does life follow Netflix? No. It looks like it does. But life does not imitate Netflix. PsyOps imitate Netflix. And the PsyOps are pre-scripted, staged events. And the reason why they follow Netflix or any of these big movies is because they're part of a unified information field, giving one information. It's like an echo chamber. Ryler says, a small group can never rule the world unless they have everyone believing the same thing. That's why monotheism is useful for the parasite class. And when we say monotheism, we're talking about the synchronization into, like, one leash, one button they push can affect everybody in the same way. And I think 2020 revealed how everything is indeed synchronized. Every weapon of mass destruction puts us all on the same sheet. That's why the fake nuke is such a big deal. And why, if they're fake, it should reframe everything. Because they introduced this hypothetical, and now everything's rearranged around it. So we've arranged our entire society around the distinct possibility and likelihood of mutually assured destruction, irreversible damage, total calamity. And that we're all in this big circular firing squad, like a Mexican standoff. Everybody's pointing their guns at everybody, and everybody lives in fear, and we all pay for protection. And this is unifying the universal threats. The movie The Village is one of the best explanations for this, where the elite, the elders, keep all the people in the village in a state of ignorance. So they're living this nice, rural, 18th century lifestyle. They're just out there in the woods, and they don't know about the 20th century. And that's because the elders keep them ignorant. And they dress up like monsters and prance around in the woods in order to keep everybody from leaving, because they're told, well, there's monsters in the woods. And so my point here is that this is analogous to the media and the elite controllers who use hyperstitions, superstitions, and psywar to keep everybody in their constrained box, in this realm of possibilities. Like, we better obey this or this will happen. Thank you very much, Ted Stryker. He brought in 10 blue titanium wrenches. So Ryler, Truth Hurts, Sink Lloyd, Max Carter, Verkjun, NDB, Joe Santo, and It's Snoopy, Marcus and Rodeus have all received the blue wrench. Thrustazar said people hated on the village. Right, I'm not surprised. But the village is one of the best examples, because in the village, they even did drills where the children are hiding in basements while the monsters run around knocking on doors, just like school shooting drills. And the only people that saw through it were able to see through it for very specific reasons. One of them was anti-authoritarian. The other one was visually impaired, so the propaganda didn't work as hard on that one. And the other one was intellectually incapacitated and thought the monsters were funny. So the propaganda didn't work on these three. And outside the village, there were these bushes planted that had these red berries. And they were taught from a young age that the red is the banned color And if you see the red, turn around. And that got me thinking about like red pills or forbidden fruit, keeping everybody in the garden. Till says, you're not happy to debate, you jump on insults. I haven't insulted anybody. And I don't know what your problem is with Garrow. I mean, I don't speak for him. But I don't know what your problem is here. But honestly, like, we're not here for drama. I think you can go to TikTok for that. I don't know. Where does drama have an audience? So I'm not trying to ban you because I'm afraid to debate you. I've given you opportunities to like point out where I'm wrong. Please correct me. Is the Earth really a globe? Thanks. Very helpful information. But no, you didn't give me anything. You just griped a little bit. I think it's funny that the far right, woke right, are synonymous with the groper movement. Oh, groypers. The frogs. And all the groypers do is they gripe about how they're incels. They're involuntarily celibate because of Jews in Hollywood and feminism and multiculturalism and open borders. So they can't make babies. And they're going extinct. And they're being genocided. So now they're groypers. And I'm listening to their grievance politics all day. And I'm like, they sound like gripers. And that's what it comes down to, gripers. Gripers on the left, gripers on the right. Anyway, thank you all for the comments. We'll continue this conversation later. Linda Curtis has joined us. Thanks for joining. Oh, nice. We got a new Miles Mathis on the shooter of the Free Palestine terrorists. I'll review that tonight. Yeah, there's a big difference between me and Garrow. Garrow's a Bible believer. I'm practically an atheist. Like, I don't believe in any of the mainstream God constructs. I don't believe the Bible is divinely authored. I question whether these figures even existed as anything more than archetypes or metaphors or plagiarisms. So I'm going to hell, probably, and I don't care. So, like, no, I'm not even close to a religious believer. And all I'm doing is I'm noticing what is. I'm an objectivist, possibly the only one on the internet. And what Garrow points out are objectively true facts. And like them or not, these facts are stubborn things and they don't care about your feelings. Now, as far as the Bible belief, maybe I'll be proven wrong. But I haven't been so far. And I don't know what it would take. I thought about this today. Like, if someone was trying to convert me, like, what would it take? Like, you would have to do something. Like, I don't know. I have a very high standard of evidence. So I'm closer to atheist than monotheist, but I could be considered maybe I lean towards panpsychism. Like, I do think the universe is intelligent, but I don't know what that means. As far as, like, I'm not in a religious box, not a simulation theorist. In fact, I hate simulation theory because it's a misnomer. It's not even a theory. And too many people who are into the simulation thing think AI is the devil or AI is God, and they become relativists in every sense. And I find that to be detestable. I do believe in good and okay, I do have a religion, I guess. Manichaeism. I think I might fit that box. I do think that there is a central aspect to our existence, and I do think it involves light versus dark. I think it's that simple. Like, I'm even leaning towards the idea that a lot of people here are basically demons. Like, not in the Hollywood sense, but what I mean is they're negative entities. Like, some of us, I think, and I include myself in this, but I could be wrong, are light descending into matter. And I think there's a war on consciousness of us being aware of our celestial origin place. But I think just as many of us that are here from above, for all intents and purposes, light, not of the world, I think we're matched by an equal number of people who are of the material realm. And I think that's the central struggle here. So I'm not saying they don't have souls, but I think their souls are intrinsically negative, anchored to the world. And I think that's the basic struggle here. between enlightenment and endarkenment, light and dark, ignorance versus knowledge. And that explains the structure here. They're not after your money, they're after your attention. All right, let's see here. Going through your comments before I leave here. Portal says we should take music breaks to let the mind relax after bombardments of great info. Well, right now, for some reason, the software isn't really allowing me to play a lot of audio. Like I've been trying, it just buffers. Stellar says the printing press is about 300 years old and Garrow buys accounts of events from thousands of years ago. Yeah, I happen to look at religions as old school fake news. So like CNN or Fox, right? These are worldviews that promulgate like the news, the world as it is. And I think prior to that, you had various accounts, history books that tell you things, but religions are an all-encompassing worldview giver. It's like a worldview filter. The Christian worldview is a thing. But I also think that mainstream media is essentially, it's not just supplanting, it's replacing. As the dominant worldview, the church has been replaced by media. So it's the new fake news. Deprogrammed Truther says you should teach a class. You've understood it pretty damn well. A class on what? Oh, on this. I talked about this before. This is where I think I diverge with simulation people. Because the simulation theorists also mix in with a lot of wishful thinking and magical thinking. And when I talk about what I believe, this good versus evil, dark and light, they tend to say that I am being too negative. That by even contemplating that there is dark and evil here, I'm negative, or it's a negative viewpoint. But no, I think it's reality. I mean, I'm not in denial about it. But I've been watching a lot of vampire movies lately for the same reason, because I'm just trying to understand it. I want to understand the negative entities that seem to have an ulterior motive here. And I think this explains a lot of stuff about the world. And they're not all self-aware. But, I think it's not overly simplistic to say it is good versus evil. I do think this is an essential point. And I think most people live as though everything's neutral. And that's a victory for the dark side, in my opinion. But I also tend to notice that the religious types are lukewarm, or they're not even looking at it as literally as I am. And I'm not even a religious person. But the only reason I think so is my own personal lived experiences. And so I came to be a true believer in evil in like 2013. And I'm not going to get into it here, but over a period of several months, and then after a very specific event, I became more or less convinced that not only is there an absolute evil presence, but that it has its own conduits. It acts through people. So I look at this light versus dark as sort of like the human conduits for each side are competing for space. And I think evil wins by default. I think that the default position is the world is, of course, the material realm has all the advantages. And I think, too, that the media fakery is not just about your votes. Sure, it's about ordering society and compliance, but I think a lot of the media fakery is to discombobulate the perceiver from their true relationship to the universe. In other words, killing off intuition, getting rid of the idea of a soul. The soul is not very scientific. And if there's no soul, well, then there's nothing to fight over. Ted Stryker says, vampires and chupacabras are the same to me, fallacy. Well, vampires have been written about for a long time. And I think it describes something. We're talking about parasites among us. And I think it was Bram Stoker was actually part of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which is the Lemite New Age group. The blood is the life. And I think they knew something. Like, okay, so the QAnon movement, it believes in adrenochrome, and that the elite are capturing people and taking the substance out of their brains, and it's making them live longer and stuff, which is debunked. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton. She's not taking any life extension. But I think there's a truth to it. But I don't think it's a physical substance, but rather I think it's your consciousness. The light from your soul itself is being extracted and repurposed. And I think that if you're not in control of your own mind, somebody else will control it. Well, I think the same is true for the soul, for your very essence of your being that manifests through your mental awareness, but that there is this other aspect to us that is siphoned off, given away flippantly. Louche is how some have described it. But the idea of vampires is that vampires are these parasites that drink blood, or the deep state drink adrenochrome. Well, I think there's truth to it, but it's not literally your blood. But it's the reactions they get out of you. It's the emotional reactions. And I don't think it's necessarily a physical thing. That's what I mean by it. I think it's on a metaphysical level, the concept of spiritual war implies that there is this war over your soul. But again, that's not scientific, and we're just over-evolved apes with big egos, and that's just me coping with the meaninglessness of everything in the universe, right? And I would have agreed with that until I encountered a situation, not just people, but a situation that had me walking away from it as like some people, they have these moments where they have like this conversion moment. And my conversion moment wasn't finding God, but it was finding what I believe to be not just evidence of evil, but evidence of evil's war on innocence. And, I could be wrong, I could be delusional, but I'm just going off of my experience, and I wouldn't tell people that this is the way. I wouldn't teach it. But I've looked through all the different religious models that try to explain this stuff, and Manichaeism does seem to explain it. It does seem to explain this. And it would make sense to me in a lot of ways. But it's a very dark view, and it's very, I guess it sees the world as an evil, fallen place. And I think that is an accurate description, but it doesn't mean I don't like it here. But, it is what it is. We eat each other. All right, this has been great. We'll talk soon. I will be live more often. The PSYOP trading cards are in print, and I'll be getting those before the 4th of June. And as soon as I get those out, they're going to ship, and then we're going to print out the next 12. Mizell says, the things we do in the shadows is a good vampire show. If you haven't seen Sinners, Sinners is good, and Sinners fed a lot into the contemporary PSYOPs as we knew that it would. And I mentioned that Carmelo Anthony just got his sentence or his charge, first-degree murder. Meanwhile, Shiloh Hendrix is walking free. So that's some serious injustice. Okay, well, I'll continue this conversation tomorrow. I'm going to do some tech support stuff. I'm going to try to fix everything here, including my ability to play audio. I got the video back on, but that's about it. I'm going to do some work with the lighting, revamping the headquarters here. So thanks, everyone, for your support. And if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments where I'm wrong. Like, I'm not running from debate. I want somebody to prove me wrong on any of these things. I can rest easier. Ted Stryker, yes, awesome. Thank you, Ted Stryker, for getting the cards. No spoilers. Until they're shipped out, I'm not going to share the ones that we printed. But there's going to be many more to come.